In 1924, two of the most brilliant young men in America set out to commit the perfect crime. Not for money. To prove they were superior beings, above the law, too intelligent ever to be caught. They planned it for 7 months. They chose a 14-year-old boy almost at random, and they were caught in a single day by a pair of glasses that slipped from a pocket in the weeds. This is the case of Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, two wealthy university students who believed their genius placed them beyond right and wrong, and who murdered a child to prove it. It is the story of a crime designed to be flawless, the small thing that unraveled it, and the most famous courtroom plea in American history, delivered to save two confessed killers from the gallows. Nathan Leopold was 19. A prodigy who had already finished university, he was a serious ornithologist, a national authority on a rare warbler, and was said to read many languages. Richard Loeb was 18, the youngest graduate in the history of the University of Michigan. Charming, privileged, and privately fascinated by crime, by detective stories, by the idea of the master criminal who could never be caught. They came from three of the wealthiest families in Chicago, neighbors on the same quiet, prosperous streets, and between them was an intense, mutually dependent bond. Leopold would later say his own part in what followed was, as far as he understood it, done simply to please Loeb. Together they arrived at an idea. From his reading of the philosopher Nietzsche, Leopold had taken a notion of the Superman, a superior being so far above ordinary people that the ordinary rules of right and wrong did not apply to him. It was his own version of the idea, not a faithful account of the philosophy. But the two young men came to believe it described them. And if they were truly above the law, there was a way to prove it. They would commit a perfect crime. For roughly 7 months they planned, not a crime of passion, a problem to be solved, worked at with the same brilliance they brought to everything else. They settled on a kidnapping for ransom because it was intricate and because it required the victim to be killed to prevent identification. That, to them, was simply part of the design. They built an elaborate scheme to collect the ransom thrown from a moving train, so the money could never be traced to a meeting place. They rented a car under a false name. They prepared a chisel, rope, acid, and a ransom letter, typed in advance, before they even had a victim. On the afternoon of May 21st, 1924, they drove through their own neighborhood looking for a boy. They found one they knew. Bobby Franks was 14, Loeb's second cousin, a neighbor who had played tennis at the Loeb house. He was walking home from school. They offered him a ride. He got into the car. He did not reach home. What happened in that car they had rehearsed only in theory. In practice it was clumsy, and it was brutal. And it is the part of this story we will not linger on. Bobby Franks was killed. They drove to the marshland near Wolf Lake, at the edge of the city. They hid his body in a drainage culvert beside the railroad tracks and poured acid over it to make identification harder. Then they went home, cleaned the car, burned the boy's clothes, and set the rest of the plan in motion. That evening, the Franks family received a phone call, and the next morning a special delivery letter, $10,000 in unmarked bills. Follow the instructions, it said, and your son will be returned to you safely. Bobby had already been dead for a day. To the two men who wrote that letter, the ransom had never really been about the money. It was the final move in the game. And the game was already lost. That same morning, before any ransom could be paid, a laborer passing the culvert saw a foot. The body was found and quickly identified. The perfect crime had lasted less than a day. And in the reeds nearby, police found a pair of eyeglasses. The lenses were ordinary, the frames were ordinary, but the hinge was not. It was an unusual patented design, sold in all of Chicago by a single optician to just 3 customers. One of them was Nathan Leopold. He had an answer ready. He was a birdwatcher. He often visited that marsh. The glasses must have fallen from his coat. It was almost plausible. Asked to put them in his pocket and lean forward to show how they might have slipped free, he tried again and again. They would not fall. The prosecutor called it the hand of God. Whatever it was enough. There was more. The ransom letter had been typed on a machine, and the type matched documents from Leopold's own law school study group. And the alibi that the two had spent the day driving and picking up women in Leopold's car collapsed when the Leopold family chauffeur said the car had never left the garage. On the last day of May, they confessed. Loeb first, then Leopold. Their accounts agreed on almost everything except the one thing that mattered most. Each said the other had struck the fatal blows. Each named himself the driver and his friend the killer. It has never been settled. Many believed it was Loeb. It was never proven. The families turned to the most famous defense lawyer in America. Clarence Darrow was 67, rumpled, and deeply opposed to the death penalty. He took the case, he admitted, in large part to fight the gallows itself. The public wanted the boys hanged, and Darrow made a decision that stunned everyone. He pleaded them guilty. It was strategy. A guilty plea meant no jury, only a judge, deciding the sentence alone. Darrow did not believe he could persuade 12 ordinary citizens to spare 2 confessed child killers. But one judge he thought he might reach. Where the responsibility is divided among 12, he said, it is easy to say, away with him. For about a month the hearing filled with psychiatrists arguing over the minds of the 2 young men, their youth, their disturbance, the forces that had shaped them. And then, across 3 days in August, Clarence Darrow rose and delivered his plea. It is remembered as a 12-hour speech. In truth, it ran closer to 8, spread over 3 days. But its power was real. He begged the court not to answer one killing with another. He spoke of the defendant's youth, of mercy, of a future in which people might look back on hanging the way we look back on burning witches. He is said to have left much of the courtroom and the judge himself in tears. On September 10, 1924, Judge Cavalli gave his answer: life imprisonment for the murder, 99 years for the kidnapping. He was careful to say it was not Darrow's grand theories that had moved him. It was, he said, simply the age of the defendants, both still teenagers, that stayed his hand from death. He suggested that a long life in a prison cell might prove a heavier punishment than the rope. They were spared. And within hours, they were gone, taken away to prison. The 2 who believed themselves above all ordinary fate came to very ordinary ends. 12 years later, Richard Loeb was attacked by another inmate in a prison washroom and died of his wounds. He was 30. Nathan Leopold lived on. He served more than 3 decades, and in 1958 he was paroled. He moved to Puerto Rico, worked in a hospital, taught, married, and published his study of birds. He died a free man in 1971, an old man, in his bed. They had set out to prove they were exceptional, that the rules binding other people did not bind them. The record shows the opposite: 2 clever boys, undone in a single day by a pair of glasses and by the oldest truth in any courtroom. No one is above it.